Translation from Ixtlilxochitl, Historia Chichimeca. Of the extraordinary severity with which the King Nezahualpili punished the Mexican queen for her adultery and treason. When Ahuitzotl, king of Mexico, and other lords sent their daughters to King Nezahualpili for him to choose one to be his queen and lawful wife, whose son might succeed to the inheritance, she who had highest claims among them, from nobility of birth and rank, was Chalchiuhnenetzin, daughter of the Mexican king. But being at that time very young, she was brought up by the monarch in a separate palace, with great pomp and numerous attendants, as became the daughter of so great a king. The number of servants attached to her household exceeded 2,000. Young as she was yet exceedingly artful and vicious, so that, finding herself alone, and seeing that her people feared her, on account of her rank and importance, she began to give way to the unlimited indulgence of her lust. Whenever she saw a young man who pleased her fancy, she gave secret orders to have him brought to her, and having satisfied her desires, caused him to be put to death. She then ordered a statue or effigy of his person to be made, and, adorning it with rich clothing, gold and jewelry, had it placed in the apartment in which she lived. The number of statues of those whom she thus put to death was so great as almost to fill the apartment. When the king came to visit her, and inquired respecting these statues, she answered that they were her gods, and he, knowing how strict the Mexicans were in the worship of their false deities, believed her. But as no iniquity can be long committed with entire secrecy, she was finally found out in this manner. 3 of the young men, for some reason or other, she had left alive. Their names were Texcoco, Ahuitzotl, and Mashtla, one of whom was lord of Texcoco, and one of the grandees of the kingdom, and the other 2, nobles of high rank. It happened that one day the king recognized on one of these a very precious jewel which he had given to the queen. And although he had no fear of treason on her part, it gave him some uneasiness. Proceeding to visit her that night, her attendants told him that she was asleep, supposing that the king would then return, as he had done at other times. But the affair of the jewel made him insist on entering the chamber in which she slept, and going to awake her, he found only a statue in the bed, adorned with her hair, and closely resembling her. This being seen by the king, and also that the attendants around her were in much trepidation and alarm, he called his guards, and, assembling all the people of the house, made a general search for the queen, who was shortly found at an entertainment with the 3 young lords, who were likewise arrested with her. The king referred the case to the judges of his court, in order that they might make an inquiry into the matter and examine the parties implicated. These discovered many individuals, servants of the queen, who had in some way or other been accessory to her crimes, workmen who had been engaged in making and adorning the statues, others who had aided in introducing the young men into the palace, and others again who had put them to death and concealed their bodies. The case having been sufficiently investigated, he dispatched ambassadors to the kings of Mexico and Tlacopan, giving them information of the event and signifying the day on which the punishment of the queen and her accomplices was to take place. And he likewise sent through the empire to summon all the lords to bring their wives and their daughters, however young they might be, to be witnesses of a punishment which he designed for a great example. He also made a truce with all the enemies of the empire, in order that they might come freely to see it. The time being arrived, so great was the concourse of people gathered on the occasion that, large as was the city of Texcoco, they could scarcely all find room in it. The execution took place publicly in sight of the whole city. The queen was put to the garrote, as well as her 3 gallants, and from their being persons of high birth, their bodies were burned, together with the effigies before mentioned. The other parties who had been accessory to the crime, who were more than 2,000 persons, were also put to the garrote and buried in a pit made for the purpose in a ravine near the temple of the idol of adulterers. All applauded so severe and exemplary a punishment, except the Mexican lords, the relations of the queen, who were much incensed at so public an example, and although for the present they concealed their resentment, meditated future revenge. It was not without cause that the king experienced this disgrace in his household, since he was thus punished for the unworthy means made use of by his father to obtain his mother as a wife.